My name is Diya, and I'm really happy to be here today in front of you all. Thank you for being here. So, I was invited today to speak to you on the topic of ambition and success. And I must admit, despite my initial captivation with the topic, when I truly sat down to write my speech, I found myself grappling with a few very large questions. What really is ambition? And what really is success? And are they synonymous? If one is ambitious, does that ensure that one is also successful? Because you see, as a 17-year-old, my understanding of these abstract concepts is constantly evolving, and my definitions of this continue to change as I undergo victories and setbacks in this rapidly changing world. So, synthesizing these ideas appears to be a dynamic task. For instance, when I was 6 years old, my definition of success was to successfully tie my shoelaces, all by myself. And then at 8, it was to beat all my friends at Wii Sports. And then at 14, it was to do well in my ballet exam. And well, now at 17, it's to do well in the IB. But we live, as students today, we live in a very paradoxical society, and our pathways to any sort of success seem elusive and shrouded in uncertainty. Because on the one hand, we have a society that tells us to discover ourselves and to diversify our metric for success, but at the same time continues to impose upon us traditional markers of success. And this is especially prevalent here in Singapore. We all know it. Get into a good school, get good grades so you can get into a good college, and then we'll get a good job. And then once you have a job, keep working to achieve bigger and bigger things and move up the rungs of the corporate ladder. But really, is this praised desire for ambition, for having a grind set and constantly trying to achieve bigger and bigger things really good for us? Is it really benefiting us in the long term? So to consider this question, I went back and reflected on my own experiences and the time when I was most ambitious. Before I tell you what I have to say next, I'm going to provide you with a little bit of context. I have an older sister who is the ideal older child in an Asian household. She did absolutely brilliantly throughout high school, and then she went on to study engineering, and now she's getting her master's degree, and she's gotten a whole bunch of scholarships and awards along the way. And naturally, growing up, I felt this constant comparison to her to prove that although younger, I was just as good as she was. And I remember this one very distinct moment from when I was 11 years old, and she won this scholarship award that our high school offered. And I remember having some sort of a moment of epiphany, but from then on, my definition of success was to get that same award. So over the next few years, I worked and I worked. My justification for this drive to get this award was that it was a seemingly objective metric that would account for both our academic and extracurricular activities and show everyone that I was just as good as she was. So I worked, and I did not care about the fact that it was not at all an objective determiner of our worths, but slowly I placed my entire self-worth on getting this one award. And I moved to the correct school and did all the correct activities and kept my grades up. And when the time came, I applied for the scholarship. And I got through the first round, and the second round was some sort of psychometric English writing test thing. And standing in front of you today, 2 years later, I could not tell you what I wrote on that test. I think they asked about global warming, and I wrote about some other humanitarian crisis. But being under so much pressure, I completely choked and, again, did not write much on that test. So obviously, I didn't get that scholarship. And then what? That was ambition, wasn't it? And I worked hard, didn't I? But that didn't lead to success, or at least it didn't lead to what I had defined as success. Of course, I learned a lot, like the need for me to have better mechanisms in place to deal with performance anxiety. But even so, I had still failed. And for a while after that, I didn't really want to do anything. I didn't have any goal that I was trying to achieve. And reflecting back on that experience through the lens of this TEDx speech topic, I have to wonder, is ambition really good for us? Because in this case, I was driven by immense feelings of inferiority and the desire to attain some sort of self-worth. But when that didn't work out in my favor, I felt like I had no worth at all. And so I began to question, why fundamentally do we humans do things, right? Because it's so much easier to not do things. Like, why do we voluntarily study 5 extra hours to do well on a math test or run a few extra miles to get fitter when it is so much easier to not do things, right? And so, pondering upon these questions, I realized that unfortunately, I didn't have the answers because I was 17 years old, but I turned to the experts for help. And I read up on various psychological theories on the subject. And one particularly pertinent one was Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So some of you may be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it is essentially a psychological theory which seeks to explain the motivations behind human behavior. So esteem finds itself relatively high up on the hierarchy, but what Maslow did is he stratified things that he believed humans needed for well-being into 5 distinct groups, and then he mapped them onto a pyramid, which essentially meant that humans will seek the things higher up on the pyramid once they've fulfilled the strata below them. So the way it works is at the very bottom, they have physiological needs, things like the need to sleep, the need for food, the need for water. After that, we have safety needs, so the needs for security, order, predictability, safety from crime and abuse. Then we have the need for love and belonging, so for friendship and good relationships in general. And after all of that, we reach ambition and the esteem needs. So Maslow essentially suggested that in order to achieve some sort of standing amongst our peers and to achieve their respect, and therefore gain self-esteem, we seek achievements, and we seek fame, and we seek prestige. And coming to this realization and understanding this led me to a new line of questioning. Then what really determines what is good ambition, or something that will benefit you in the long term, and bad ambition, which, like my desire for the scholarship, will leave you feeling awful and actually 2 steps behind where you were when you started? So, synthesizing various perspectives on this, I decided that, in my view, this can be broadly divided into 2 categories of things that lead to good ambition and then things that lead to bad ambition. So, the good ambition includes things like passion, purpose, yearning for growth, increased confidence, social and financial needs, creativity, and competition. While things that lead to bad ambition, like my drive for the award, are feelings of inferiority or feelings of superiority, the fear of failure, rejection, jealousy, and a general lack of confidence. So once this was established, I realized that I myself as a student need to start taking a step back from the pressures of my day-to-day life and truly reflecting on what is propelling me to be at the engagements that I'm at and to be doing the things that I do, and whether this will truly have positive impacts on my life, or will it have drawbacks in the long term? And in conclusion, I would just like to encourage all of you as well to maybe take a step back and consider why you do what you do and whether that's a good thing for you in the long term or not, because I've definitely learned a lot this way. And as much as it is easier said than done, I think we all need to work on trying to escape the comparison trap that we often fall into and realize that there's an infinite number of possibilities for what we can do, and there's no universal structure that we all have to follow, and there's no universal success waiting for all of us. We all have our own journeys and should respect that. Thank you.